My name is Morgan Cross, and the night my parents tried to hand me a mortgage, I never agreed to. I realized just how far they were willing to go. It was a Thursday in late spring, one of those evenings when the air feels heavy, like it's holding a secret. My mother called right after work, her voice sweet in a way that always made me suspicious. "Come over tonight," she said. "We have something wonderful to share." She didn't say what. She never does when she's setting a trap. When I walked into their living room, the three of them were already waiting my dad in his recliner. My mom perched on the couch, and my older sister, Monica, sitting too stiff, her smile a shade too thin. A manila folder rested on the coffee table like it was the guest of honor. Dad stood to hug me, then handed me the folder. "Take a look," he said. Inside were pages heavy with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, mortgage agreement. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through numbers that made my stomach drop. "It's for Monica's new house," Mom said, beaming like she'd just announced a wedding. 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys. They need stability. That's nice. I managed, and I started to hand the folder back, but Mom pushed it toward me again. "Those are for you." My grip tightened. For me, Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided you'll take over the mortgage. You've been saving for years. You can handle the payments easily." I looked at Monica, but she didn't meet my eyes. "After the divorce, I have nothing," she murmured. The air in the room turned thick. My pulse hammered. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I would." Dad didn't flinch. "You don't have a husband or children. You can do this." Something in me snapped, quiet but final. "No. This isn't help. This is manipulation." I set the folder down and walked out without another word. Not realizing that saying no would be the first step in a fight, I never asked for a fight that would drag me into court against my own parents, with a price tag of $350,000, and they weren't bluffing. Growing up in the Cross household was like living in a play where everyone already knew their lines except me. Monica was cast as the star from the beginning. She got the bigger bedroom, the extra slice of pie, the praise that came with every school performance. I was the understudy who never got called on stage. It wasn't that I failed. I did well in school, got into a good college, worked part-time to cover what my scholarship didn't. But no matter what I achieved, my parents' eyes always seemed to be looking past me, toward Monica's next milestone. When Monica married in her mid-20s, they threw a reception in our backyard, complete with white tents and a jazz quartet. When I landed my first professional job at a financial firm, they sent a short email, "Congrats, Morgan." That was the difference. I told myself it didn't matter. I built a life that didn't need their approval, rented a modest apartment in downtown Portland, invested in my retirement account, even started a small savings fund for a future home. My work was steady, my circle of friends close-knit, and it was quieter this way, keeping my distance. But even from a distance, I was still the one they called when Monica needed help. Her car broke down. I wrote a check. She wanted to go back to school for a certification. I co-signed the loan. None of it was ever called borrowing, but I treated it that way quietly, hoping one day someone would acknowledge that I'd been there. When her marriage started to crack, I was the one who noticed first. The silences at family dinners stretched longer. Monica's smile looked rehearsed, and when the truth finally surfaced that her husband had been unfaithful for years, I didn't hesitate. I paid her divorce attorney's retainer before she could even ask. I covered 6 months of rent when her part-time work at the community center couldn't keep up. I watched her boys on weekends so she could breathe. I thought maybe finally this would be the moment my parents saw me not as a backup plan, but as someone who carried weight in this family. But if they saw it, they never said. Instead, every conversation about Monica's troubles came paired with questions about my personal life, like I was missing some essential ingredient without a ring or children. It didn't sting as much anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. I just didn't know they were already planning how to make my savings their solution. The first sign that Monica's life was truly unraveling came on a rainy Saturday when she showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her makeup was smudged, her hair damp from the drizzle, and she clutched a grocery bag like it was a life raft. Inside were her boys Evan, 8, and Luke, 6, quiet in a way that didn't fit their usual energy. "They've been with him all week," she said, her voice flat. "He dropped them off and left without saying a word. I didn't ask where he'd gone." By then, I knew. The whispers about an affair weren't whispers anymore. They were confirmations. The truth had been sitting in the open for years, but Monica had been holding it together with sheer denial. Within a month, the divorce papers were filed. He vanished from the picture completely, no child support, no birthday cards, not even a text. Monica moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and a kitchen that smelled faintly of mildew. The boys shared a room. She took a part-time job at the community center, but it barely covered groceries, let alone rent. I didn't think twice before stepping in. I wired her the retainer for her attorney. I sent her half the rent each month without asking when she'd be able to take over. I even stocked her fridge a few times when I noticed the pantry shelves looking bare. She never said thank you outright, but I told myself it didn't matter. I loved my nephews. I understood that pride can make gratitude hard to voice. What I didn't understand was how quickly my parents reframed my help as something owed, not given. Calls from my mother became updates about Monica's struggles, how the boys had outgrown their clothes, how her car needed repairs again, how the apartment was no place to raise children. I would listen, nodding silently, and then she'd slide in a question about whether I was seeing anyone yet, as if my romantic life were an open debt ledger too. Through it all, I kept thinking maybe this is just what family is. You step in. You carry more when you can. You don't expect applause. But I missed the moment when help turned into obligation in their minds. And that was the moment that would come crashing into my living room, disguised as a manila folder, filled with numbers I never agreed to pay. That Thursday evening felt off from the moment I parked in front of my parents' house. The lights inside were too bright, and through the window, I could see them sitting together like they were waiting for a guest of honor. When I stepped inside, my dad stood up immediately. My mom's smile was tight, rehearsed. Monica sat beside her, legs crossed, hands clasped in her lap like she was bracing herself. On the coffee table sat a thick manila folder. "There she is," Dad said, giving me a quick hug before pressing the folder into my hands. "Take a look." The first page screamed mortgage agreement in bold letters, the numbers beneath making my stomach tighten. "It's for Monica's new house," Mom said, her voice brimming with pride. 3 bedrooms, big yard, close to the boys' school. They need a stable home. "That's great," I said cautiously, trying to hand it back. But she pushed it toward me again. "No, these are for you." I blinked. "For me," Dad cleared his throat. "We've all talked, and you'll take over the mortgage. You've saved for years. You can make the payments without trouble." Monica's eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "After the divorce, I have nothing," she murmured. I could feel heat climbing up my neck. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I would. You don't have a husband or kids," Dad said, like it was a fact that explained everything. Mom reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, we raised you. We've done so much. Isn't it time you gave back?" I set the folder down slowly. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. "This isn't help. This is manipulation." No one spoke. The silence was heavy, almost daring me to take the words back. I didn't. I walked out that night without looking back, thinking they'd cool off in a few days. But they weren't cooling off. They were just getting started. The first call came that Saturday morning from a number I didn't recognize. "Morgan, it's your cousin Denise," the voice said without pause. "I heard about the house. I can't believe you're being so cold." I was still half asleep, the coffee maker sputtering in the background. "Excuse me, Monica's a single mom. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on all that money and won't help." My grip on the phone tightened. "Denise, you don't know the full story." "I know enough." she snapped. Family helps family. Monica would do the same for you. The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. No, she wouldn't. She hung up. That was only the beginning. Over the next week, the calls multiplied. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunts and uncles. Even a family friend who used to live down the street. Some were blunt, calling me selfish. Others tried guilt, reminding me of everything my parents had done for me. The worst was Aunt Carol. She called during dinner, her tone dripping with condescension. Morgan, you're not getting any younger. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way, you'd be contributing to the family's future. So because I'm single, I owe Monica a house I asked. Don't be dramatic. You're in a position to give, and they need help. That night, I blocked every number that had chimed in. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve my peace. But even as I shut down the noise, I felt the shift inside me. This wasn't about a house. It wasn't even about Monica. It was about the unspoken belief that because I hadn't built a family of my own, my life and my savings were available for theirs. I thought ignoring them would make it stop. Instead, it only pushed them toward their next move, one that would turn a bad family fight into a full-blown legal war. 2 months passed without a single call from my parents or Monica. The silence was so complete, it almost felt like peace. I poured myself into work, started walking every morning before the city woke up, and tried not to think about that folder. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I came home to find a thick envelope wedged in my mailbox. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal civil complaint. Robert and Evelyn Cross v. Morgan Cross. My parents were suing me for $350,000, claiming reimbursement for expenses related to upbringing. I read it twice, my hands trembling. They had itemized everything: food, clothing, school supplies, even emotional support during adolescence, which would have been funny if it didn't feel like a knife between my ribs. And at the bottom, clear as daylight, funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the property purchased for Monica Cross and her minor children. They weren't even pretending it was about principle. The next morning, I sat across from Janet Morales, a lawyer recommended by a coworker. She flipped through the complaint without a single blink. "They have no legal right to your money," she said. "Parents are required to provide for their minor children. There's no expectation of repayment once you're an adult." "Then why sue me?" I asked. She shrugged. "Pressure tactic. They think you'll pay to avoid court, or they genuinely believe you owe them?" That night, I opened my laptop and began digging through old folders, bank statements, receipts, emails. I pulled every record of the times I'd sent them money: $500 here, $1,000 there, the $5,000 retainer for Monica's divorce lawyer, $7,200 in rent payments. I found screenshots of text messages from Mom asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. Every document was proof, but each one also carried a memory I hadn't wanted to revisit. By the time our court date was set, I had a thick binder ready. I wasn't naive enough to think this was about winning them over. This wasn't about changing their minds. It was about making sure mine still mattered. The courtroom was colder than it should have been for a summer morning. Beige walls, thin carpet, hard plastic chairs that seemed designed to punish anyone who sat too long. On my side of the aisle sat just 2 people, Grandma Helen and Grandpa Charles. They didn't say much, but their presence felt like a shield. Across from me, my parents sat shoulder to shoulder with Monica between them. Behind them, a row of aunts, uncles, and cousins who hadn't sent me a birthday card in years. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He looked to be in his 60s, gray at the temples, glasses low on his nose, the kind of man who didn't rush because he'd already heard every excuse. My dad spoke first. "Your Honor, we're not unreasonable people, but we invested our lives and resources into raising Morgan. We're asking for a portion back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge flipped a page. "Did you contribute to the defendant's college expenses after she turned 18? Dad hesitated. At that time, we were helping Monica and her husband get established. So, no, the judge pressed. No, Mom admitted quickly. But my mother, Morgan's grandmother, did. From behind me, Grandma let out a soft, unmistakable scoff. Janet rose calmly. Your Honor, we have documentation proving Ms. Cross has been financially independent since age 18, and that she has repeatedly provided financial support to both her parents and her sister. She handed over the binder. This includes $7,200 in rent for her sister, $5,000 to her divorce attorney, and multiple deposits to her parents during times of reported hardship. The judge reviewed the pages in silence, then looked up, so the defendant was not receiving support, but giving it correct. Janet said, My mother's voice broke the quiet. That's not relevant. We're talking about the cost of raising her. The judge's gaze was steady. Why exactly do you need $350,000 now? Mom glanced at Monica before saying softly, To help Monica pay off the mortgage. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd heard that day. The following week, the courtroom felt smaller, almost intimate, as I sat waiting for the judge to return with his decision. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the edge of my grandmother's brooch cool against my skin where it pinned my blouse. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Cross, the financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He looked down at his notes, then back up, his voice firm. The evidence also shows Ms. Morgan Cross has already provided significant financial support to both of you and to her sister. Frankly, your actions toward her have been brazen and disappointing. Case dismissed, just like that. It was over. Janet allowed herself the faintest smile. Grandma squeezed my arm. Grandpa leaned close and whispered, You're free? But I didn't feel free. Not yet. A week later, Grandma called. Your mother stopped by, she said quietly. She asked if we could release her inheritance early. I already knew why. For the mortgage. Yes. She begged us not to disinherit her. I didn't know what hurt more, that she asked, or that she cried over money instead of what she'd done to me. Months passed. I closed on a small house of my own, painted the kitchen a warm yellow, planted tomatoes out back, adopted a gray tabby that slept by my laptop every night. Monica rented out her house and moved back in with our parents. Then, almost a year after the trial, an email appeared in my inbox. No subject line. Just, since you have extra space now, we think it would be best if Monica and the boys moved in with you. It would be more convenient for them. I read it twice, then replied, I will not be hosting Monica or the boys. If you contact me again with such demands, I will report it as harassment. I hit send, blocked the address, and made myself tea. This time, the quiet that followed felt like mine. These days, my house smells of coffee in the morning and fresh basil in the afternoon. The cat spends hours on the windowsill, watching birds he'll never catch. I tend to my tomatoes, fix what breaks, and lock the doors at night without thinking about who might show up uninvited. I still hear bits of news through Grandma, how Monica is back at my parents' place, how the boys are growing fast. Sometimes I wonder what they've been told about me, if they'll ever reach out when they're older. But I don't wait for it. What I've learned is that love, when tied to conditions and guilt, isn't really love, it's leverage. And boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're doors you choose when to open. I don't regret saying no, even if it cost me the version of family I thought I had, because what I gained, peace, safety, the ability to breathe in my own space, was worth far more than any relationship built on obligation. I am Morgan Cross. I have my home, my quiet, my freedom. And I've learned that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do for the people you love, especially yourself, is refuse to be their solution.